Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is not a drill. I have an early copy of Manor Lords. This is easily one of the most anticipated survival city builders of the year, if not several years. Over 2 million wishlists on Steam for a one-man indie project. Incredibly impressive, and it is right around the corner, officially releasing into early access on April 26th. Now at this point I've had a few hours to play around with the game, and I'm going to show you some of that gameplay in just a little bit, though before I do, I want to stress that this is not a review video, okay? That's not allowed in the terms of the embargo. That's very standard for the industry. However, I think you can infer the fact that the publishers were willing to give me, Pravus, some early access to their game means they're probably feeling pretty confident, but I'll show you how this game works and let you be the judge. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and start up a new game. Now you'll be able to choose your character portrait and also a custom coat of arms. And there are a lot of different options that you can choose from, but I've already got something in mind because you can import your own symbol. Boom, that'll work. And for your game setup, there are 3 different templates currently available. We have Rise to Prosperity, Restoring the Peace, and On the Edge, each of which have a different victory condition. We'll take Rise to Prosperity here, but to make things more difficult, I'm going to add some adversity. We're going to have an off-map enemy who will be expanding across the map. Also, I will allow for raiders to attack, though I'll increase the number of years between their attacks just to give me a little bit of time to recuperate. And then also you can change some of your starting supplies, and whether or not you can place wells anywhere or if they rely on underground water, etc. Lots of game rules to enjoy. And with that, we are off to the races. Okay, so now we are zooming in on our starting location. Now before we begin, I want to go ahead and pause so I can show you the map so you know what you want to look for. Because at least in the early access, you may want to consider restarting a few times until you have a halfway decent starting resource. In my case, it looks like we started off in Goldhof, one of several different regions in our corner of the world. Every region has 5 different resources you'll need to pay attention to. We've got wild animals and berries for early game food, and then clay, iron, and stone for some building materials. Some of these deposits are going to be rich, which means they produce extra goods, and you're going to be building your economy very heavily around your rich deposits. Something else to consider is going to be your farming. If we take the construction menu here, I can look at several different overlays. This will show me things like underground water, also fertility. So for example, I can see we have a decent amount of wheat fertility off in this direction, not so much in flax or in barley, and rye is usually far easier to grow than wheat. This gives me an idea where I might want to start placing down some farms. So with all of that out of the way, let's start building. If you go to that construction menu, there are several different categories you'll need to worry about. The first and most important right now is going to be the logging camp, and this can be relocated later on. I'm going to be placing this somewhere kind of central to our starting village right now, because I want to start chopping down some of these trees to make way for better farming. I also want to place down a woodcutter's lodge for the same reasons. This is going to produce some early game firewood, and I need that as well. Planks and foresters can wait for the moment, but food cannot wait, so let's go ahead and place down a hunting camp and also a forager's shack. There are some wild animals in this direction, so a place on the edge of the forest like so, and then same thing here with the foragers. Okay. There's more I need to build, but these are the 4 starting buildings you really care about, so let's zoom in on our people. We have 5 families who are currently living in this region, and every family is able to work one of these jobs. These are their homeless tents right now. We have a bunch of supplies sitting around, and also the all-important oxen. Something interesting about this game is people cannot drag around timber on their own. It is simply too heavy. You need an ox in order to transport timber for all your construction projects. No ox, no construction. So let's go ahead and increase the speed of the game just a little bit while we drag the timber over here. You can see that our unassigned families are currently working on the construction project. You need to always have at least 1 unassigned family if you want to work on your construction, otherwise nothing is going to happen. And the logging camp and the woodcutter's lodge are both done. So now we are going to assign a family to work in both of these locations. We could assign more, but this should be fine for the moment. And then just to make sure that the right trees get chopped down, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to select a specific work zone. So something like this should be fine. Okay, so we'll let them get working, and in the meantime, let's build up that forager's hut and the hunting camp. And then just as before, make sure we assign a family, and if we want to, we can assign a specific work area. Though we don't strictly need to do that here, because the berries and the animals kind of only show up in one spot. Okay, with that all taken care of, the next thing we'll want to think about is our residential construction, because all of these people need some homes. Again, let's pay a little bit of attention to where the land is the most fertile, so I know where I want to place some farms. Probably going to take up this entire area over here with just farming. I could build along the main road here, and that would be a fairly safe choice. So tell you what, that's exactly what we're going to do. We could place down some of our own roads, but let's use the main one for now. I'm going to go to my residential section, and I'm going to be placing down some housing plots. Now, the way that this is going to work is you place this in 4 different points. So something like, let's say, this. And you can see that it's automatically going to try to create 4 different plots for an area this large. What you can do is place down this point, and then you can, let's say, rotate it around something like this. You can decrease the number of plots that are allowed to be there, or you can make it more dense. And there are reasons to try not to go for too much density. The reason this matters is because right here you can see where the house is going to be, and then any extra land can be devoted to some sort of a backyard extension onto the house. This can include, let's say, some backyard gardening for vegetables or some chickens, and later on also some artisan expansions for, let's say, cobblers or, let's say, a Fletcher or a blacksmith, etc. You almost always want to have this if you can. If you build too small and too dense, you miss out on some opportunities. Also, if I reduce the density here, you can see that there is room for housing expansions. So maybe I can actually fit 2 families on this plot of land instead of only 1. Which means the way this is currently set up, by making it less dense, ironically, if we're willing to invest more resources, I'm going to end up fitting a total of 6 families here instead of only 4. So we're just going to go ahead and do this. And there we go. Let's go ahead and speed up the game while the ox is going to drag some of these logs around, and these homes are going to get constructed. Something else we are going to need very early on is going to be a marketplace, and just like with the housing, you simply place down some sort of a plot, kind of like, let's say, this. This would allow for up to 55 market stalls to be placed down. I don't place the market stalls myself. All I'm doing is setting aside space for people who are working their jobs to then peddle their goods amongst each other. Ideally, you want to have this placed close to your residential areas, and also make it large enough to kind of future-proof. So this is what we're going to go with. Housing is starting to go up, and you gotta admit, this looks very rustic. Honestly, the appearance of the game is great. When you zoom out like this, it may look kind of, just kind of okay, but when you zoom in and you really get to enjoy some of that detail, dude, this looks sick. Let's go ahead and place down a few more plots over in this area, and this should be a nice urban zone. Placing down roads is kind of fun, by the way. You can kind of snap automatically to some of the existing roads or some of the hard points of your structures, which makes things kind of easy. But it also works in splines, so if I just keep clicking, I can kind of drag things around like this and create my own custom pathing. Kind of nice. Now, how do you grow your population? Primarily by building additional housing and enjoying immigration, right? Now, you do have another requirement, and that is going to be your approval rating. Right now, it's a little bit low because we have some homelessness, but as long as we can take care of our people and provide for their needs, this goes up. As long as you have above 50% approval and a spare house available, there is a chance that a new family will immigrate into your town. This provides the workforce you're going to need in order to be successful. Now, while they're working on all this, there's more construction projects we can queue up. It would be wise to have a well at some point nearby, so we can place one, let's say, over here on this underground source. I would also like to get myself, let's say, a granary, so we can store food that we gather in a nice central location. The same thing is true with a storehouse, so I can store any of my building materials. Not logs, those usually end up sticking around the logging camp itself. We can also move our hitching post elsewhere in the village, let's say right over here, so that the oxen is in a nice central location, easily grabbed and taken between several different jobs. Okay, and now that we have all of our existing families housed, we have just gained a development point as we've increased the size of our village. We are a small village now. In order to increase this once again, we need to have at least 2 level 2 burgage plots. All right, in order to upgrade your plots, there are several needs you need to provide. I need water access, I need a church, I need fuel at the marketplace, I need at least 2 different sources of food at the marketplace, and I need clothing. I don't have a lot of this right now, so that's going to take a while. In the marketplace, by the way, we can already see a couple of stalls have been set up. We've got a firewood peddler, and we have a food stall that's just presumably going to end up being for things like meat. More of these are going to get set up. You'll need to have at least 1 or 2 of these for every family in your town. Anyway, before I get too distracted, what is the development point that we just got? Well, if I take a look up over here at the title of our village, we can click on this and see that there are going to be several different ways that we can develop and specialize our workforce. For example, if I think that I'm going to get very good at farming, we may want to consider working toward getting things like orchards and rye cultivation. We could get a heavy plow so we can actually plow out some much larger fields using our oxen, and then go for things like fertilization, which would allow us to use our sheep to fertilize our pastures. There's a lot of good stuff to be enjoyed up here. If you think you're going to be very dependent on trade in the beginning of the game, trade logistics can be good for reasons I'll explain later on. Or you could go for more hunter-gathering types of societies with trapping, better berry deposits, beekeeping for honey. And then down over here we have the fires of industry. This is going to lead to charcoal burning, which can stretch out the value of your firewood by quite a lot. Also deep mines. So if you have a rich deposit of, let's say, stone or iron, it becomes an infinite source, which is obviously very, very valuable. Now, some of these points are currently locked. They are not available at this stage of early access. This game has a long way to go in terms of its development, but we can at least get a very good idea how it is going to develop. Eventually, we can also look at getting some policies passed, which are going to change up our society, but that's not going to happen for a bit. And then there's a production menu, which is currently completely blank, and I have no idea how it's going to work. How do we want to spend our first development point? You don't get a lot of these, so you need to be very, very intentional. I think I'm going to end up going for a very heavy farming build in this game. So I'm going to pick up the heavy plow, with the anticipation that I'm going to want to then move to things like fertilization, because this means a lot less downtime for your fields. If you're feeling a little bit lost, don't worry. I've got more that I'll show you about how farming is going to work later on. Just understand that that's why I made that decision. I'm going to go ahead and plot out at least a few more burgages over here. And let's start looking a little bit toward the future about things we're going to need. We already know that we need to get a church if I want to make my people happy. That means I not only need a fair bit more timber and some stone, but we're going to need some planks. So now's not a bad time to go ahead and place down a saw pit. Now the saw pit is going to turn that timber into planks, which means you want to place it really close to your logging camp, or at the very least close to your hitching location. Right over here is fine for now. This building, like several others, can be relocated for free, so don't worry too much about early placement. All you care about is going to be efficiency. Later on, we might move this elsewhere. Oh, and it looks like another family has joined us. We now have 6 families in total in my village. Perfect. All right, I need to have somebody work in, let's say, this granary. As soon as it is done, somebody needs to manage all of the storage of these resources. Boom, that'll do for now. And I've still got 2 empty burgages over here where people can move in, so I'm hoping we get a couple more families very soon. In fact, since we have no more construction projects, I'm going to have somebody go and work in the storehouse as well. So there's no unassigned workers right now, but that's okay. The reason I'm doing that is all of our supplies are just sitting out here right now. And whenever it rains or the elements get harsh, your food and your supplies can start to deteriorate unless they are placed in a building. I don't feel like wasting anything, so let's just get it out of here. And we've already got another family. Perfect. Let's go to the saw pit, and we are going to assign a family there. I'm going to make sure that we always set aside at least 10 timber as construction reserves. I don't want to accidentally burn through all of this and then find that I can't construct anything of value. But as long as we end up having more than 10 timber available, we'll start converting that into planks. You might be wondering, well, why aren't you just going ahead and placing down all of your farms right now? At the very least, you could go ahead and start marking this area out so you know where you want to save your fertility and stuff as you do your urban planning, right? And that sounds very smart, but if I place down all these farms right now, then what'll happen is it'll just destroy all of these trees. And honestly, getting early game resources is really, really important. I'd rather not waste all of this. I'd rather chop it all down, get that taken care of, get the rest of our economy online, and then as soon as I have a couple of spare families around, that's when we go ahead and enable farming. That's coming up very soon. We can place down a farmhouse in preparation, though. This is where we will be able to assign people to work all of the fields. You'll see why this is important later. Don't worry about it. Now remember, our current goal is to get at least 2 of these houses upgraded into a level 2 burgage plot. That means I need to get that church up and running, but we do need to get things like clothing. So right now, in order to do that, we would need to supply either linen, leather, or yarn. Linen is made from flax, leather from hides, and yarn from sheep's wool. Well, I don't have most of those right now, but I do have hides, so what we can do now is go to a whole nother menu I can show you called Industry, and there are a lot of refined goods we can work with, including making iron slabs, tools, clay tiles, malts for ale eventually, leather, linen, and of course dyes. We want to get ourselves a tannery, so that's going to be one of our next projects. And I don't mind placing that really close to our storehouse where those resources will get located. Now, one thing we could do that might speed things up for us is try purchasing a second oxen. If we take a look up over here, we can see our regional wealth. This is not my personal wealth, it's just the villagers' wealth in this region specifically, none of the others. I can spend this. If I go to the hitching post, we can order another ox for 20 of our wealth. So we've placed this order, and now we're going to wait for a livestock merchant to come through our town and then drop off the ox. It's going to take a little while, and if you want to become more dedicated for livestock trade, we could do that, but right now I think this is going to be fine. Let's see, it looks like, yes, I am producing some leather. So if I zoom in here on the marketplace, another stall is already set up. Yep, that is a clothing stall. Perfect, okay. So if I click on a house, yep, that need is met. All I need is a church. And we do have enough materials to make that work. Okay, let's go ahead and get one placed. I don't really want to risk taking up my fertile ground, so maybe we try placing the church in this general area over here. Yeah, this could look kind of nice. We'll go ahead and place it a little bit offset from the road, though, just so I can come through here and add a little path. Just makes things a little bit more interesting. And this is going to take quite a few resources, which is fine. It is very important all of your buildings are connected to a road, by the way. Not just because it helps people walk faster, but because most people, as they transport their goods around from day to day, are going to be making use of hand carts, like this one right over here, for example. He's going to be loading that one up. So you really want to make sure that they have a path they can follow using those hand carts. Otherwise, it just makes their life needlessly difficult. How are we doing on most other resources? It looks like I am struggling just a little bit with fuel. We've only got about 4 months of fuel to work with. That's partly because we're chopping down all of the local trees here. Soon we're going to need to move this somewhere else so we can start extracting from a much larger group, like this forest over here. Whoa, where's the camera going? No idea. By the way, since we're already zoomed over here, I guess it's a good time to go ahead and point out that we are not the only lord on this map. We have someone else over here called Hildebolt von Burenut, or however you say that, I have no idea. This guy over here is also going to be able to start expanding and claiming regions for his own and building up a village, though at the moment I don't see his village. Maybe you have to actually go to it in order to see it. I'm not too sure. We would be able to actually engage in some form of diplomacy with him, saying he has no rightful claim to certain areas, for example, or negotiating for silver, declaring war. There's things you can do here. This is a fairly threadbare system right now, but you can kind of see how this would work, especially if you had multiple players all in the same map vying for territory. Then all of a sudden, warfare starts to look pretty attractive. So the church is almost done, by the way, and it's looking very beautiful. Again, fairly rustic, but we're not exactly a wealthy society right now. So with that taken care of, yep, it looks like every one of these houses has their needs met. We are consistently providing clothing, multiple sources of food, we have water, we have a church. Yeah, this is looking good. So then you look at this button right over here. Upgrade to a level 2 house. This is going to take even more of your lumber. That's okay, though. I don't mind. As long as we have enough lumber to go around, I need to upgrade at least 2 of them just so I'll be able to get my next upgrade and another development point. Now, your unassigned families don't need to be the ones who upgrade houses. This actually is going to happen automatically by the people who live here. So it's okay if you've got none of these guys around, but it does mean these guys are not going to be working their jobs while they get their homes rebuilt. Just in time for winter, too. But now you can see a direct aesthetic comparison between the 2 different types of housing. Starting to look a little bit more wealthy. We've got a couple of families to spare, so now's a good time to start thinking about how we are going to be placing down our fields. I think all of these trees are too young to harvest right now anyway. So let's start planning some farming and go to a whole new tab. I've got my farmhouse. This is where I can assign a couple of families who will work here. And I can go ahead and use my extra lumber plus an oxen to add a plowing station so we can plow fields very quickly. But before I do that, let me show you the gist of how this works. I want to get myself some fields, and I mostly want to keep them to the highest fertility regions that I can. The two resources you really want to be thinking about in the beginning of the game are going to be emmer and barley. If you can find flax, like, that's great, but in my experience, only 1 or 2 zones on the map are extremely fertile, like these over here, for example. Wish I had started there. Emmer and barley are going to be your 2 early game resources you really need to worry about. And just like with the housing plots, you have to build everything out in 4 points. Typically, though, what's going to happen is all of the working area is going to be measured in morgens. I don't exactly know how that compares to acres, but I assume it's the same basic idea. About 1 morgen is what you're going to be shooting for some of your early game farms. So let's go ahead and construct this like so. Thank you. But you don't want just 1 field. You probably want to get a few more than that. So let's plan this out something like here. 1.4 is a little big, but that's fine. And then I want to get myself a 3rd field. 1.2 right here. Sure, that'll work. Okay, we've now got 3 fields that are prepared. Now, each of these are currently set as fallow, which basically means nothing is going to be grown here. We're just going to let the land rest to recover some fertility, up to whatever its baseline is, based on whatever you were finding from the overlay. It can't really exceed that. The reason this matters, though, is you are going to make use of crop rotations. Crop rotations mean that you want to have some years where you are growing something, like let's say the wheat, and then a year that it is fallow so that it has a chance to rest, right? And you can mix and match some of your different crops. The fertility will drain away whenever you're growing something, which is why you want to give it some opportunities to rest a little bit. So what I'm going to do is kind of have these guys on an opposite schedule, where we are growing wheat on some years and then swapping which year it is fallow. So in theory, my farming families are only ever going to be working 2 out of the 3 fields. Now, honestly, 2 families are going to struggle even taking care of 1 field at a time. So that's where we want to have the plowing station set up so that they can plow these very quickly. In the meantime, we are now getting another development point. Let's go back up here to Goldhof. So as fun as some of these other choices would be, I do think the next thing we're going to do is go for fertilization. This is another upgrade for our fields. What it does is it allows us to use a fallow field, which I just showed you, as a pasture. So it's actually getting some usage. We're going to be rotating animals between our fallow fields, and they'll graze there. But you can imagine, sheep dung is a pretty good fertilizer, which means these fields are going to regain their fertility very, very quickly. But we don't have any sheep yet, so how does this do me any good? I'm glad you asked. This is going to lead me into the trade system, which is a whole nother menu down over here. We have 2 different buildings we can construct. We have the trading post, where we'll be able to buy and sell generic goods. That's going to include your building materials, your food, weapons, special artisan goods, etc. Very important to build up your regional wealth over time. But if I want to get livestock, then what we're looking for is a livestock trading post. I'm just going to go ahead and place that down over here. And in the meantime, let's make sure we continue building out some additional houses, because we always are going to need more families as long as the food supports it. By the way, something that I do recommend, while most of these plots can have room for family expansions and also a backyard for some other additional extensions, and I'll show you those in a bit, at least toward the center of your village where you have some of your storehouses, I recommend actually building densely at least for a few houses, like 4 or 5. I have reasons I'm saying that. You'll understand more about why in a bit. And it looks like our first winter is fast approaching, by the way. Okay, people burn through twice as much fuel during the cold months, so this is going to be a major challenge at the beginning of the game. Also, the berries are going to disappear, and yeah, that means you're going to be pretty starving for food. Berries are very important at the beginning of the game, but getting off of reliance there is going to be very helpful. By the way, notice that we burned through a lot of the wild animal deposit over here. You do not want to overhunt too much. In fact, it's worth leaving behind at least a few animals. So set a hunting limit to maybe just being about half or just under half of the animals. That way you don't accidentally get rid of this deposit. You want them to repopulate. Does that mean you're going to have less meat and leather? Absolutely it does, which is going to be a major challenge. It would not be a bad idea, by the way, to start thinking about how you want to generate some wealth in your village. Building up level 2 plots over here is certainly one thing you can do. For every family that lives in this area, you'll start gaining 1 extra wealth. So that's why we're gaining a little bit of regional wealth here right now. But also, this is where trade becomes helpful. Now, what I have found so far is by a long shot, there are two different types of goods that can help you. One is to get the clay and start turning it into clay roof tiles. With those, you can make an absolute ton of money, especially if you have a rich deposit. If you don't have a rich clay deposit, but you do have a rich iron deposit, you could do something similar and start manufacturing tools to sell. Or if neither of those are an option, you should rely very heavily on forestry. That means you're going to want to go ahead and place down a forester's hut somewhere, plant down a load of trees, and then let your loggers just keep working the same area year-round. I do have a rich clay deposit, so I want to think about maybe placing down something new in the mining tab. We can get either a stonecutter camp, or we can get a mining pit, which is used for iron or for clay. In this case, I want clay, so we're placing this down over here. And then, of course, making sure that we get this hooked up to a road network because we want people to move their handcarts. There we go. Okay, that should do the job. Perfect. Did we finish getting a... Oh, we do have the livestock trading post. Ah, right, I meant to do this earlier. Okay, let's do this next. So what we want to do is assign a quick family over here to be working in this area, at least temporarily, and then we're going to go to trade. So the way that trade works is you can open up a menu of all the different trade goods that can pass through this area, and you can see their import and export prices, right? So export is the 20 here, and then import would be the 30. I want to say I want to import some sheep specifically. I'm willing to buy, let's say, 2 of them, all right? So when somebody comes through that is able to sell livestock, I will get myself 2 sheep, all right? We want to get more than that, but for now, 2 is all I can afford, which is why we need to think about how we want to get some wealth. And then in the meantime, since we're going to have some sheep, let's go ahead and spend some of our planks to fence up these fields so that during the fallow period, they regain their fertility very quickly. When we eventually do get ourselves a trading post, you're going to find that this works exactly the same way, right? You place down a trading post, you're going to have a list of all the different goods, you're going to import and export various different things. There's one extra twist that you need to be aware of, but we'll come back to that. Now, what other things can you do with your wealth? This is where the extensions for your homes come into play. Remember, I mentioned those. So over here, we have a backyard extension. I can click on this and see a drop down of all of our different options, and there are quite a few of them. Most of the time, you can spend some wealth to simply place down some vegetable gardens or a chicken coop for some food, or a goat shed to get some hides, or if you unlock it, you can get some orchards for apples. These take a while to grow, but can produce a halfway decent amount of food. So if you just want extra food variety, this is something you're going to need. Beyond that, though, this is where you can also get your craftsmen. We've got tailors who can make various different types of special clothes. We can get armorers, bowyers, cobblers, joiners, brewers, blacksmiths, bakers, etc. All of this is going to be necessary at some point. Why do I know that? Because if I click on the level 2 plot over here, we can already see what we're going to need in order to get it up to level 3. So I need to get a tavern. That means that we're going to need to be able to produce some ale. That means growing some barley, refining it into malt, and then also having someone dedicated to brewing. All right, so we need that at a tavern. Then we also are going to need special kinds of clothes. I need shoes, some clothing, or some cloaks. That means a mix of linen, or we're going to need some sheep's wool and dyes. And then also, of course, you need 3 different types of food. Having vegetables or eggs can satisfy this. All right, so this gives you an idea what we're going to need. Oh, and also we need to upgrade our church. Right, what do we need to upgrade the church? I'm going to need some of those roof tiles I have been talking about. All right, all the more reason to go ahead and start up that production. Did somebody come by with some sheep, by the way, already? It sure kind of looks like it. There's a sheep right there. All right, we see a sheep just kind of hanging out. Not inside of a pen for some reason, though, which is a little bit awkward. The reason for that is the livestock trading post is not good enough. We need to go back to our farming and place down a sheep farm right over here. It's a small little building, but this is a small place where we can set up some of our sheep and also where our farmers can be assigned so they manage them out in our new pastures. So this actually needs to be a very high construction. I do not want to risk any of these sheep running away. That would be a problem. And by the way, it looks like the snows are melting, so we have survived winter. Not a bad start for our little settlement. Now, I do think I need to assign some livestock specifically to this farmhouse here. Because right now, at the beginning of the year, everyone's coming through here and trying to plow this by hand. Which I admire, but it's going to take a very long time with this much space. If I want to have a chance at plowing this land in time to plant down seed, I need to use an ox. There we go. Now we're using the ox. All right, look how fast this boy moves. Now we have a chance. I think it might be time to go ahead and start planning on some trade. So let's go ahead and place down a trading post toward the outside of town. And I also want to go ahead and start producing those roof tiles at the clay furnace. Small one over here should be fine. And I know, by the way, that I can go ahead and start upgrading more of these homes to level 2. And we probably should, because that would let me get another development point. How much timber we got? 19? Yeah, all right. Let's go ahead and upgrade a few more homes. Okay, so this field with only one person with an ox has beaten all of these workers who are doing this by hand. Now, if you look down over here at the bottom, what you can see is there are a few different stages to farming. There's plowing, then sowing, then growth, and then finally, of course, the harvest when we get to autumn. So now that the plowing is done, everyone is happy to go over here and start throwing out the seeds. The sooner you can do this, the more growth time you're going to get. We've also got our trading posts. Okay, now I said that there was going to be at least one big difference between the regular trading post and the animal trading post, right? So if you go over here, you can see all the different categories, and there are a number of different goods that we can play for. However, in order to actually trade any of this, first, you need to spend some money to establish a trade route. Now, for things like stone and planks, that's very, very cheap. We spend a small amount of regional wealth, and now we can import or export our planks at will. If you want to import or export roof tiles, though, it's a bit more expensive. 48 gold, okay? That's a lot. I actually don't know what determines this price, by the way, because some of my games, I've actually seen this being a lot higher, like 128. Like an absolute ton of wealth, right? It may have something to do with which of these little trade points are next to us. So if we scoot out to the edge of the map, you can see that there's one right here. I had one over here, so I can't imagine that was the case. Same over here. Yeah, I'm not sure what determines the cost. But, yeah, if it's very expensive, there's a way around that, and this is where you use your development points. If you come down here to the trade logistics, establishing a new route will never cost you more than 25 wealth. In some cases, like the one I just gave you, that can save you like 100 wealth. That's not a small amount of money, so it could be worth it from a development perspective. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that trade, at least at this stage of early access, is a little bit punishing. So, for example, let's suppose that I don't have the ability to grow my own barley, so I can't make malt, so I can't make ale, so I can't make people happy at the tavern and get to tier 3. I want to buy some of my own barley. To do that, it would cost me 12 wealth for my imports. That's pretty pricey, especially when you factor in that some of these refined materials, like let's say shoes, is going to only export for 8. So even though you're going to have to produce hides, right, which takes some labor, plus you're going to have to refine them, that's still not worth as much as just importing one barley. All of a sudden, all your money's gone. You produce a tiny amount of ale, and your people are thirsty again. So do be aware that trade is not necessarily an easy system to use right now. It's pretty pricey. You need to be careful. Don't go crazy trading and buying a lot of things. You need to be as self-sufficient as possible. Let's see, what else? I actually also need to get some stone cutting up and running, because I just realized we are out of stone, and I need this if I want to upgrade my church. So let's go ahead and build this. How are we doing with our seeding, by the way? 3 families were able to get through the entire seeding process for these 2 fields, and in the meantime, one of them is fallow and is going to be doing fine on fertility. This is honestly great. If you're going for an early farming setup, I cannot recommend enough going for these 2 development points. Where do I want to spend my third one, though? That's a really good question. We could go for that trade logistics. I could try to increase the amount of meat we can get, so we can get passive income of meat just from having the hunter's den, eventually be able to double the amount of meat we get, or double the capacity of berries, or go ahead and get the beekeeping so we can work on things like wax and ideally, I assume, candles. I think what we want to do is go for charcoal burning, though. This is going to stretch out my fuel substantially. So that would be good. Then we can worry about things like deep mining. Other options might include sheep breeding, so sheep grazing on pastures will multiply. I assume that's the case with a fallow field as well. So maybe this is a way of getting a lot of sheep, and we can export excess sheep to make money. That could be an option. Irrigation, reduce the impact of droughts, but to do that we would need to get orchards. And then rye is just straight out better than wheat in a lot of ways. It's way more resilient and has so much more fertility options. Oh boy. Other options would include basic armor making so we can get helmets and plate armor. Yeah, all that would be good. I think I have to go for the charcoal burning. I really do need to extend my fuel out a little bit. That is something we are going to struggle with. But there are a lot of really good choices. I feel like I never have enough development points, honestly, for what I need. And honestly, in order to get my next development point, look what we need. 3 level 3 houses. So by now, you hope you have a solution as far as how you're going to fix up your clothing, your church level, your taverns, and so on. If you don't have a solution, well, that means you're going to be relying very heavily on trade, and as I said, that can be very punishing. One thing I really like, by the way, if you're trying to decide whether some houses should be able to upgrade, if you go to your marketplace over here, you can actually see what your supply and demand is looking like. So right now, we're meeting the demand for most people, but we don't have quite enough leather. Not quite enough fuel and stuff going around. That's not to say that it can't fix itself, but you can see immediately which of the houses has not supplied itself. The same thing is true with things like food variety. So over here, it's a pretty easy way to identify, hey look, this house could probably upgrade to level 2. I'm gonna get myself some additional housing over here. We still need more families. And that means that I want to work toward, what is it, under gathering, we want to get ourselves a charcoal kiln. Yes, that is something I know that I need. Let's go over to our trading post real quick and make sure that we do unlock this roof tile option. I know it's expensive, but this is going to be one of our easiest things for us to export, so let's go ahead and set that up here and say that I want to have a surplus of like 20, maybe 30 tiles. Anything in excess of that, go ahead and just start making me some wealth. Also, the church is done. Perfect. And you may have just seen a very small symbol pop up there. That was called influence. Now, if I look at the very top right where you can see my character and my coat of arms, you can see a few different metrics here we haven't had to touch yet. Influence is useful to press claims on different territories. We'll need this if we want to, let's say, expand and take over this zone. Because maybe we want to have that rich iron deposit, right? Or maybe we want to go over here for the rich stone and the berries, that kind of a thing. And then also, we have treasury. This is not your regional wealth. This is your personal wealth, which you obtain from taxes. The only way we're going to start getting that is if we build up our own personal manor. I'm going to need this, but it's not the highest priority this second. Oh, and you can see we've already got a lot of regional wealth. Okay, that is what happens when all of a sudden you sell off some of those excess clay tiles. Thank you kindly. That means we can come down here, we can go ahead and import at least a couple more sheep, maybe let's say up to 6. Cost me a lot of money, but that's fine. I want to be able to produce lots of wool. We can also now safely go to some of these different houses and say, hey, over here, I want to go ahead and start growing, let's say, some vegetables. That does cost you wealth. And you can actually see that the families over here are now able to start working some of these areas. Now, the danger of this, of course, is that these are people who probably could be doing other jobs. So you don't necessarily want people to go too crazy over here and spend all their time gardening when they should be doing their other jobs. But this is where it can be helpful to expand the living space so that a second family can live on the exact same plot and share the garden. Not to mention, since these are level 2 houses, I'll get some extra wealth, and that's nice. Now, one thing I'd love to know is where all my wheat went, because we harvested a fair bit of it, and I'm guessing that people just, ate it or something. Obviously, what I wanted to do was process that into some flour so we could bake it into bread. Well, let's go ahead and try to make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm going to place down a windmill over this direction, plus a communal oven so that people will be able to take that flour and turn it into bread. I'm going to go ahead and place down a forester over in these areas, by the way. We are deforesting this area pretty rapidly right now, and I want to make sure that we have enough trees growing that we can keep this sustained. We might move things around later on, but for now this should be fine. The big concern I've got right now, honestly, is going to be the tavern. I really am worried about whether we can get enough barley. So I've had some test games where I found myself in that same trade situation I talked about earlier, where I really had to buy barley in order to make ale. But it was so expensive that I burned through all of my wealth, so I couldn't actually save up enough money to actually place down any roof tile trade routes, so I couldn't generate money. And by the way, the price of this has gone up, so again, I'm not sure what is driving this. It may be population-based. So yeah, that's a thing. So if I can grow my own barley, that at least makes this somewhat plausible, and now we've got 6 fields, 4 of which are up and running at any given time. Hopefully this is not too much for me to handle. I do know that we are producing a halfway decent amount of wool. I'm going to need to start processing that into yarn. Let's take a look at our industry and see what options exist for that. I don't think there is one. Oh, yes, there is. The weaver. Perfect. Okay, so we need a weaver workshop. We'll go ahead and place one of those down, start manufacturing yarn. That's a whole new form of clothing that we can sell at the market. But more importantly, what I can do is come over here to one of these level 2 plots, and we can say, I want to place down a tailor, where I will be able to start manufacturing more advanced clothing. Alternatively, the cobbler's a thing. Do we have any extra hides? No, we're using all of that for leather. Does the cobbler take leather and make shoes? It doesn't actually say, but I'm assuming that's the case. Tell you what, let's not go for the tailor yet. Let's go ahead and get a cobbler up and running. So this is one of your artisans. Now, this is going to be placed in one of those plots where I can only ever have one family set up. The reason I am doing that is once you place down an artisan, the family that lives in this area cannot be reassigned to work other jobs. They are cobblers now. That is going to be a thing. So if I have a plot with 2 families on it, and then I set up a cobbler, guess what? 2 families are now making more shoes than I could ever hope for. Sometimes that's what you're going to want, but other times, not so much. So I'm trying to carefully control that so it's not an issue. And there we go, by the way, I just saw this fill in, so now that we are producing shoes, the other need has been met. So the only thing I am lacking before I'm able to move on to getting some level 3 plots is going to be that tavern. That means I need the dang barley. We could go ahead and place down the malt house. I can't really do anything with it yet, but we can just go ahead and have it placed down so that when I do have some barley, we can convert it into malt. And I guess the tavern could go, like, I don't know, over here or something. We're going on to, what, year 3, year 4 now, by the way? Bandits are going to attack me at some point. Knowing that that's going to be a threat, it might be worth starting to mine some iron here as well. I think I will. We will want to start crafting weapons and moving on into the military side of the game pretty soon. And that takes a lot of prep. Lots of metals, lots of planks. We also should really consider building up our manor. It is time to do that. Now, right now, the manor is a relatively small building. It's not super fleshed out, not quite yet. If we place this down, though, you'll be able to see kind of how it should work. So this is going to be our starting manor, and then you can add things onto it. That could include, let's say, some walls. Like this. You could also place down, say, a tower that would go onto this, like so, for defenses. Garrisons, a tax office, which at this version of Early Access doesn't do anything right now, but, eventually it's going to. All of that stuff could be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing how that will continue to develop in the future. The reason I want to get this going, though, is so I can start enacting some tax policies. Because if we're going to get attacked by some bandits, it would be nice to have some personal wealth in my treasury, so I can either hire a larger retinue or get some mercenaries. But again, I might be getting ahead of myself. Aha! And we do have our manor up and running. Okay, so with this, now you can adjust the castle, as I showed you before, if you want to start adding on a bunch of different modules. Not worried about that. You can also see your people, where we do have some servants who can move in, and also we can start setting our taxes. So I'm going to go ahead and set a 10% land tax for now. This reduces approval in the city, which can be a problem, but for now it's fine. We could also sell off a percentage of our food and give it to the church. This would give me influence, which would allow me to start expanding and claiming additional regions a little bit faster. Our harvests are looking really promising right now, by the way. I'm kind of watching the numbers start gradually going up. The next 86 days, we should get about 144 wheat. That should eventually become 144 bread. And then 90 summit barley. That's a lot of malt. We definitely should be able to get enough ale to upgrade our houses to level 3 this year. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get myself a bloomery, another structure I know that I'm going to need so that I can start getting some iron bars. Well, I do want to start upgrading a few more artisans. I think we need to start thinking about a military. That means I may want to get myself, let's say, a bowyer's workshop. This person is going to be able to take excess planks and start turning them into longbows, which I will need if I want some ranged levies. Oh, and let's also go ahead and assign people to the malt house, and in just a moment we'll go to the tavern as well. Because it certainly looks to me like people are eating my barley. I don't want you eating my barley. I want to turn that into ale. Though that does mean we need to go to one of these houses and turn them into a new form of artisan, the brewery extension. Boom. Again, that commits one of my families to working this job pretty much forever. I can't reassign them. That's why you don't want to have 2 families on the same plot unless you want to make an absolute ton of ale. And if you don't have enough malt to back that up, it's just people eating your food for absolutely no advantage. I mean, I've got a little bit of ale. I don't need it for very long. Let's go ahead and assign someone to the tavern. Let's keep an eye on some of these homes, because any second now we should see the tavern supply solves any problems. There it is. That means we can upgrade to level 3. All right, so it costs wealth to do this, as well as planks, timber, and some of your roof tiles. No problem. I only need to upgrade 3 of them. Let's do that on the main street. Looking good, if I do say so myself. Okay. So there's our first one right here, and by getting these up to level 3, I do believe they also allow for an extra family. So we should be able to fit, what, 3 families in here now? It still says 2. No, up to 4. 4 families. Yeah, this is how you start getting some real urban density. Holy crud. How are we doing on bows, by the way? I've got 66 war bows right now. Yeah, we're making quite a few of those, aren't we? Quite a few. Somebody is going to be draining up a lot of our planks, and at this moment in early access, there's no way to set production limits. So you got to be careful with some of these artisans, because it's very possible that they eat you out of house and home on some sort of a key resource. The way you fix that for now, simply pause the production. It's a bit of a waste of the family in here, so you don't want to do this, but it is a thing you can do. Hey, look, a new message. Raiders are near. So we have 1 year now before we are going to get attacked by some raiders. That's why I'm producing some of these bows. It also is why I need to go over here to another burgage plot, and we need to set up a blacksmith where I can start producing tools, spears, and sidearms. I also need to go over here to this plot and set up a joiner, which will take more planks and start manufacturing shields or wooden parts. So let's go to this blacksmith, and we can see here under general what I can produce. Polearms or spears, or sidearms, which cost 2 iron slabs, and then of course there's cheap tools. Well, we could produce a lot more planks if I tried. Spears wouldn't be bad. Polearms are okay. Do I want to spend all of my metal getting just about, I think, about 34 or so sidearms? It's not going to be enough. So what am I talking about there? Why do we care about the different types of weapons? Well, if we take a look down over here at Army, we can actually see that right now we have a retinue of soldiers which are employed at my manor, and once you build the manor, you get 5 of them. We can expand this. We can also levy some of our own troops. We can get some militia footmen, some spear militia, polearm militia, and archer militia. What's going to happen is we have a certain number of men living in our village. If we conscript them into levies, like the archers, it will automatically assign 36 of them, in this case, to go and become archers. If you have too many of these things, it will try to evenly split them the best that it is able to. That means that everyone needs some equipment. So 36 archers needs to have 36 bows. We've got that, but what else do I want? Spears? I mean, probably spears, to be honest. Yeah, I think we go ahead and get ourselves some spear militia. That means I need to produce 36 spears and 36 large shields. I don't want to get 36 militia footmen because I don't know that I'm going to have quite enough iron to make that work. So this is fine, but let's go over here to the blacksmith and make sure that we are producing what we want. Spears only. Same here at the joiner's shop. Don't make the small shields, make the large shields. Let's consider expanding our retinue since I've got so much money. I'm going to go over here to the retinue. We're going to do retinue customization. From here we can see the 5 people who are currently assigned and what kind of weapons they're wearing. We can possibly give them better equipment later on. We could upgrade some armor here. We could change up what they look like, blah, blah, blah. Lots of things you can do here. I'm going to go ahead and recruit some more men-at-arms since I've got enough money to go around. Let's actually go ahead and get ourselves all the way up to a full retinue of 12. Now when the time comes, I'll be able to summon a retinue of very well-armored soldiers. That's going to help, because these peasants, they don't have any armor right now unless I start producing it. They got a lot of gumption. They got some of their own weapons they keep at home, but that's about it. Over here at the new tailor's shop I just built, we can manufacture clothes or gambesons, which are made out of linen, or cloaks using the yarn we are getting from our sheep. This, at least, is going to be a more advanced form of clothing using dyes, which, by the way, does require berries in order to make this. but should be a whole new form of clothing to make people happy. And our market says we are completely meeting everyone's needs, which is really great. We are about to be done equipping all of our militia, by the way, at which point I'll probably go ahead and turn off the joiner's shop. I don't really need to get anything else here and waste all of my planks. So we'll do that now, but there we go. This is great. This should be enough to deal with the first round of bandits when they do come a-raiding. If you do not have any units prepared, it's kind of slow getting them set up, but you can go over here and hire mercenaries. If I've got a lot of gold, I could hire up, let's say, the Ravenous Vultures, spend 110 of my wealth, and then every, month or so, we have to pay this again, so you don't want to do this too lightly. But you get a bunch of units who can help defend you. If you don't have money and you don't have units, then God save you, because the raiders will burn your village to the ground. Almost everything will be destroyed, and recovery will be very, very difficult. Oh, good lord, I just realized we have 299 shoes. Yeah, maybe we can go ahead and spend some of our wealth to, maybe sell some of the excess there. Jeezums. 144 wealth to set it up, though. Yeah, that's where having the massive discount from your development points would be nice. Anyway, at this point, I think we're fairly strong. My economy is looking great. We should have enough food to go around. Fuel is struggling, but we're getting there. So I'm going to go ahead and jump forward to when the raiders arrive. And the raiders have been spotted. There they are, right up over here. All right. So all of these raiders are on the way. They're going to make a beeline directly for me. It's going to take them a while to reach me, though, so I've got just a little bit of time. When they get close, I'll hire up some mercenaries. Okay, they've officially crossed into my own territory. It is now time. Let's go ahead and make sure we hire up some folks. The green caps should be fine. Let's hire this company and sign the contract. Though it just occurred to me, oh wow, they're way up over here. Last time I hired some of them in a test game, they spawned really close to me. I didn't realize that was going to happen. Good thing I have my own soldiers, because I really doubt the mercenaries are going to arrive in time. Okay, well, knowing that that's the case, let's go to our manor over here, and I want to start mustering my troops. So we're going to hit the rally button for all of my folks, like so, to make sure that they all get set up over here. All of the men across the village are about to go grabbing their weapons and making a beeline to the muster point. Looks like some of them at least are making a beeline for the manor. So I'm going to say that I want to have my archers try to take a shot at them. And to be honest, though, they're taking the cover of the forest. That's not going to work out great. Let's go ahead and send my retinue plus my spearmen up over here to try and intercept them. Oh, we are taking a few shots at them. At least one of them is dead. Okay, so this is your first taste of combat in Manor Lords. It kind of works a little bit like Total War in that you have everyone grouped together in these kinds of units, and then they are going to fight as a group. Also, they do have, morale, and as that starts to go down, they'll eventually want to retreat and give up. Got to be careful about that. Friendly fire with your archers is a concern, by the way. So once you get into the melee, the archers are going to be substantially less useful. I do need to make sure we intercept these guys before they get to my archers, because I could see them wanting to do that. How effective are my retinue of 12 armored soldiers going to be? I don't know. Mercenaries, are you anywhere close? Not even slightly. Oh, gosh. Okay, we lost a spearman. We've lost a couple men in my retinue, which is a small problem. Okay, obviously every loss kind of hurts. But it looks like they have been defeated. We have slaughtered the bandits, and I only lost 5 men in total. Cool. Hey, mercenaries, get out of here. You're useless. And now we can disband the units if we want to. Perfect. All right, that was great. Thanks, folks. And the men return home victorious to go and work their boring day jobs. Well done, men. Very well done. The corpses are going to be a small problem. We should probably, set up a corpse pile somewhere else. Yeah, this corpse pit will be fine. I'll send it over here. Now, I can imagine as you start getting larger retinues and you start developing your own armor and much better weapons and you have huge populations to muster, if you're playing against other AIs, imagine sending entire armies to go in battle against other huge armies. Yeah, that could be kind of fun. Hey, there are outlaws around here. Hello? Sometimes they do set up bandit camps. I'm not seeing any right now, so I'm going to assume that we are fine. By the way, I can claim another region with some influence. I'll go over here and do that just so I can show you what it looks like, but by claiming this, we spend 1,000 of our influence, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but when this is finally claimed, this is going to be our territory. There we go, just like so. Okay, so then we go to our construction, and we're going to go to our administration and place down a settlers camp. Now, here's something that's kind of interesting, right? We can go ahead and place this, let's say, we'll place it kind of around here, I guess, close to the berry source. We can place down a town and choose to spend a lot of money to give them extra starting resources. Though you can see in the early access, we'll be able to specialize: farming villages, forest villages, and mining villages. Interesting. Anyway, with this now set up, just like before, we can start setting up, let's say, some logging camps and everything else. Also, we would be able to set up, I think it's under logistics, some pack stations, which would allow us to start exchanging resources between our regions. That's a little bit of a tricky system that I'm not going to go into with this particular video because I don't fully understand it yet. I just know that you can have specialized regions that are going to transfer resources back and forth, and that's how you're going to overcome any shortages until you can build up a massive, sprawling kingdom. Pretty darn cool, and you gotta admit, this looks absolutely gorgeous. But I have to withhold my thoughts here, because this is not allowed to be a review video. I'm simply showing off the gameplay, and at this point I think I've shown off just about everything you need to know to form a strong opinion about Manor Lords one way or the other. So a very big thank you to all of you for watching this video, and of course a big thank you to the publisher for getting me this early access. I'm obviously going to be very excited for this game, and I'm curious how it will continue to develop. If you guys would like to learn more, I will include a link in the description down below. Otherwise, for the sake of this channel, I would ask you to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, hit that notify bell, and I will see you guys next time.